Severed, the ultimate severance podcast.
Hello there, macro data refiners. It's come to my attention you're spending a lot of time in the hallways. I would hate to have to add any doors to the MDR space, so let's keep the wandering to a minimum, please. Welcome back to Severed, the ultimate severance podcast. I'm your host, Alan S. As you may remember, Severed is a deep dive, comprehensive rewatch podcast. Everything is fair game from the first season of Severance. We're going episode by episode with tons of spoilers. Your innie should know this information. I'll share it with your outie if necessary. We ended last time on a shocking and graphic note with Helly attempting to hang herself from an extension cord in the Severed elevator. Let's not keep the poor dear hanging. It's time to open the file called The Grim Barbarity of Optics and Design. This episode was written by series creator Dan Erickson with the able assistance of staff writer Anna Oying-Munch. It was directed by Aoife McArdle, her second of 3 episodes in a row here in the middle of the run. This episode was first released for streaming by Apple TV Plus on March 11th of 2022. This episode is starting in the middle of Helly's suicide attempt. Hang on, refiners. It's quite a ride. In black, we hear the sound of the elevator arriving. Our first video is of Helly, her perspective changing as she becomes her outie. She resumes consciousness as an outie with a cord around her neck hanging from the ceiling of the elevator. We have a close-up of outie Helly reacting, grabbing at the cable, hunching her shoulders, and stiffening her neck. We cut to a shot of her dangling legs. She's kicking, trying to get purchase on the elevator handrail with a foot. As Helly's outie is fighting to survive, any Mark is ambling through the halls on the Severed level. We get a great forced perspective shot of one of the hall corners. Mark is bopping along happily, not a care in the world. Cut to the main atrium of the Lumen building. Speaking of not a care in the world, there's Judd enjoying the sunlight through the atrium, which means he's not at his desk back by the Severed elevator. It seems like it's almost end of the day. Why isn't Judd at his post? And speaking of Judd's post, we cut to the security camera covering Judd's post. The notation in the upper left says NS 8.20. The notations on the cameras downstairs usually have an S prefix. The difference might be severed versus non-severed. The elevator doors open on the security monitor. Outie Helly is visible from the waist down, her legs flailing, looking for purchase on the handrail. If Judd had been there, he'd have been a hero, saving outie Helena Egan. Since he's not, there's a cut to a close-up of Helly's feet. She's losing her shoe as the elevator doors close. Dylan has taken Ricken's book around to his own desk. He also seems engrossed in the You Are. Mark wanders into the space behind him.
Helly?
Dylan, caught, closes the book and slides it into his lap. He says,
Yeah,
a bit nervously. Mark checks his watch.
Maybe you should get out of here.
Dylan says he's wrapping up.
sorry, I love the work.
This would sound hokey coming from anyone else, but not Dylan. Mark snickers and heads out of the MDR area. We cut to the Severed elevator from the perspective of the Severed floor reception area. Mark steps into the shot and inserts his key card. As Mark is standing, waiting on the elevator, there's a cut to a slow-mo of Grainer turning a corner. He's running hard, pounding through the hallways. He must have been looking at the same security footage we saw. Cut back to Mark as the elevator opens. The reverse shot reveals a hanging, motionless Helly. Mark scrambles into the elevator and grabs her around the waist. He supports her weight as best he can, but it's awkward.
Help!
Mark is shaking, lifting Helly. Our view cuts to a security camera shot of the elevator. There are a lot of security cameras on the Severed floor. Ben Stiller said it was an ongoing discussion during production. How many cameras are really down there, and how many should be revealed to the viewer? We'll also discover just because there's a camera, it doesn't necessarily mean anyone's watching. Grainer runs into the shot from the left.
God damn it!
He removes the cord from Helly's neck. The two of them move her into the Severed reception area. Helly is unconscious. Mark and Grainer lay her on the floor. Grainer is trying to put the elevator back together. Mark's shouting at him, looking down at Helly. Grainer seems cool in a crisis, but Mark is freaking out.
Is she okay?
Mark is trying to wake Helly up. Grainer decides a panicked Mark isn't helping anything. He wants him to get in the elevator. Grainer tosses the waste cannon cord out of the elevator. He doesn't want outie Mark coming to with those at his feet. Mark isn't listening.
Get in the elevator!
Grainer pushes him in and punches the button.
Is she okay?
Mark's looking down at Helly, still motionless on the floor as the elevator doors close. Mark arrives on the main floor unaware. During the trip up, we see him go from panic and concern to bored indifference. Ben Stiller said no matter how cool the camera effect, it was really the actors who sold the transition from severed to unsevered and back. Judd is returning to the severed area as Mark's elevator opens. Neither has any idea about the drama with Helly that's playing out below.
Judd,
Mr. Scout, you have a good evening.
will do. Same to you.
Judd has a seat at his desk. The digital clock above his head clicks over from 5:15 to 5:16, and our theme begins. Hitting skip on the credit sequence is recommended on this one, Refiners. We've got a lot to get to. Talk to you on the other side. Coming out of the credit sequence, we're looking down on the entire Lumen campus and the trees beyond. It's morning. There's a beautiful sunrise in the distance, creating some great shadows around the Lumen complex. Jessica Lee Gagne, the director of photography on this series, said in an interview how much she loves working with natural light. She's such a fan of natural light, she almost turned Ben Stiller down when she found out how much of Severance would be an indoor shoot. Gagne had worked with Stiller in 2018 on the 7-episode miniseries Escape at Dannemora, and she was wanting to work with him again. She did eventually agree after finding several photography books depicting inspiring office spaces. Since so many of the scenes she had to shoot were inside, she said she really enjoyed these chances she got to shoot exteriors of the incredible Bell Labs complex. You can really tell how much she loves this subject. She mentioned in a Vanity Fair article at one point they also wanted to do a satellite view of this facility, but never got around to it. Ben Stiller also liked the satellite idea. He said using satellite pictures was one of the ways they first scouted the Holmdel complex. It sounds like we may be getting some interesting new establishing shots for the Bell Labs complex in Season 2. Mark is back again for another day. Every time you find yourself here, it means you decided to come back. Outie Mark has no idea what panic and fear await him at the bottom of the elevator shaft. The panic ended for any Mark in the middle of the emergency when Grainer hit the up button. We jump to Mark's face in the elevator. Adam Scott takes us from passive to freaked in the space of a few seconds. He comes off the elevator like he's ready to find Helly still laying there. Instead, we find Cobell seated in one of the green reception chairs. Milchick is standing dutifully behind her. I love the visible hierarchy of the severed floor. It's always apparent when you see these two together. Mark's first question off the elevator is, of course,
Is she alive?
Instead of answering, Cobell tells him to have a seat.
She's in the hospital. She has severe bruising, but thankfully no permanent damage.
Mark asks if they're letting her go, as in from the company.
Helly's outie has no intention of resigning.
But she almost died.
At this point, remember, we don't know Helly's connection to the Lumen hierarchy. I was asking the same questions as Mark my first time through. Why on earth would they allow this destructively unhappy person to continue to work as a severed employee? It's to a point where Lumen should be stopping this before she does irreparable harm. They won't, of course, because of who this is. No surprise, Cobell is not here to offer comfort. She's placing blame.
This happened on your watch, Marcus.
She stands ominously.
And you can thank Keir himself it went the way it did.
She stalks out of the room, telling Mark to have a productive day. Milchick dutifully tags along behind. Mark decides to seek solace in his new contraband. He goes to his desk for a look at the you are. He puts it under his coat and heads to the reading room, bathroom.
What is it to fail? My failure to break into the literary world in my 20s was devastating, yet it taught me a vital lesson. That it was not me who was wrong, but literature itself. And that to truly find my place in that world, I would first need to break it entirely.
Rickon is a raging narcissist who just might be out of his mind, but this is somehow giving inspiration to any Mark.
A society with festering workers cannot flourish, just as a man with rotting toes cannot skip.
Can we please just give Michael Chernus the Best Supporting Actor Emmy for making it through these lines with a straight face? We get a montage of workdays. Any Mark continues to read the banned word of Rickon on each shift.
If you are a soldier, do not fight for my freedom. Fight for the freedom of the soldier fighting next to you. This will make the war more inspiring for you both.
The words of the immortal Rickon are filling Mark's days. We see an effect where they scan by on the elevator wall. More and more inanity is being shoveled into any Mark's head.
Bullies are nothing but bull and lies.
During a Hollywood Reporter cast interview, Ben Stiller said this next one had to be his favorite of Dan Erickson's many Rickonisms.
At the center of industry is dust.
Go back and listen to them all if you get a chance, refiners. They are so deliciously unhinged.
Should you find yourself contorting to fit a system, dear reader, stop and ask if it's truly you that must change, or the system.
The indoctrination of Mark into the cult of Rickon seems to have taken at least a few days. The subversive power of Rickon's book On the Severed Floor highlights the power of written ideas when it comes to changing minds in the real world. Rickon's a crackpot with hilariously dumb ideas, yet to a population with no exposure to any other ideas, Rickon sounds like an enlightened genius. Imagine if Rickon really were a genius with the power to inspire and relate complex ideas. Thomas Paine's revolutionary pamphlet Common Sense is a perfect example of the power one well-written message can have on the course of history. It also makes it easy to understand why dictators and totalitarian regimes put such a heavy emphasis on controlling access to written ideas. As we leave Mark still communing with the you are, there's a close-up of Petey's chip, once again being slid across a desk.
Ran the diagnostics.
And?
Full synaptic coupling. Peter Kilmer's memory was reintegrated. You were right, Harmony. We should celebrate.
Cobell doesn't move a muscle. Grainer's a hardcore company guy. He's assuming this information will be shared.
I figure you'll take a beat before telling the board, especially after what happened with Helly.
Because surely she told the board about Helena Egan almost dying on this severed elevator, right? Cobell glances down at her desk, unable to maintain eye contact.
Jesus, you haven't told them.
She ignores the comment and slides the chip back across the desk.
Comb the chip data for source signatures.
Grainer tells her the chip info's saved. She can keep Petey's chip if she wants.
A gift.
Cobell tells Grainer she wants him to find out who did this. She wants to deliver everything to the board at once, both the bad news, reintegration is real, and the good news, she knows who did it. There's a cut to a close-up of the up arrow light on the elevator at the severed floor level. Mark trudges off the elevator to his locker. When he powers up his cell phone, there are a stack of missed calls and messages from Rickon.
Shit.
We hear a montage of Rickon's many voice messages.
Mark, Rickon again. We're at the retreat, and the child is continuing toward the birth canal, so it would be really great if you were here.
The baby is coming, and he and Devon are at the retreat. As Rickon's panic escalates, he gets increasingly verbose.
Mark, we're still here. Wondering if you're lost. We are in cabin 6. We're just through the gate, and at the end of the row, it's one of the more affordably sized units, but you should be able to find it. Please do come soon.
There are a couple of cool exterior shots in this transition. As Mark is leaving Lumen, we are in darkness and the parking lot lights are on. It's a pretty impressive sight. There's a nice aerial pullback on the lot, then a cut to an interesting gateway. The lighting makes it look a bit foreboding, but this gatehouse actually used to be known as the Smiley Testimonial Gatehouse. It was built in 1908 to mark the 50th wedding anniversary of Albert and Eliza Smiley. No matter what you ever get anyone for their anniversary, it won't be as cool as this. The gatehouse is located in New Paltz, New York, about 100 miles north of Manhattan. This one-of-a-kind structure is now known as the Lake Mohonk Mountain House Gatehouse. It's the entrance to the Lake Mohonk Resort. The resort itself, the Lake Mohonk Mountain House, and the surrounding nature preserve were established in the 1870s. The Mountain House has had landmark status for decades. The gatehouse was not protected. In 2013, the town of New Paltz decided to give the gatehouse some love by declaring it a historic landmark. Amazingly, as cool-looking as it is, this gatehouse has only appeared on screen one other time. It was featured in a cheesy 1985 horror flick called The Stuff.
So are you prepared to say on the air that you've actually seen people devoured by the stuff?
Oh, hell yes. And what's worse, I've seen what's left of them when the stuff gets through and comes back out.
Coming soon for you, The Stuff, from New World Pictures.
The Lake Mohonk Resort, which we don't get to see, is the hotel used in the series Upload. For Severance, this gatehouse is the entrance to the Damona Birthing Center. Damona was a goddess worshipped in Gaul. She was the consort of Apollo Borvo and Apollo Moritagus. Both were gods of healing. 17 ancient inscriptions dedicated to Damona have been recovered in 2 spa towns in eastern France. There's an entry on the Severance Wiki saying Damona translates to divine cow. That's not exactly right based on my research. One linguist gave it that moniker because of the resemblance between the word Damona and the word demos, which means cow. A European interpretation of the name translates it possibly more accurately as the tamed one. After meeting Gabby Arteta, this one definitely applies. Mark finds Cabin 6, the more affordably sized unit, with the help of a map handed to him by the gatehouse security guard. Avert your eyes, refiners, major cringe coming. Mark steps onto the porch of Cabin 6 just as Alexa is exiting. You remember midwife Alexa, right? She was with Mark the other night for dinner, then a drunken rumble in the streets with the Whole Mind Collective.
Did you forget that I was going to be here?
Slightly.
Ouch. He apologizes for the other night. It was not a great thing to witness, especially on a first date. Alexa decides to stay professional, even if this is gut-wrenchingly awkward. She says Devin is doing great.
Rickon is doing this thing where he cries over her. So I'm giving them some privacy.
Mark thanks her for taking such good care of them. She doesn't seem mad, but she doesn't hang around either. Mark heads on into Cabin 6, regardless of possible tears. We cut to Rickon in a huge sweater. He's talking to Devin's belly through sobs.
Babe, I just don't want to be like my father.
No, baby. I think it's good you're getting it out now.
Mark enters quietly.
The uncle-to-be. Welcome, Mark.
Devin was worried they wouldn't wake him up or whatever out at Lumen.
Oh, no, I just saw the message when I got off. I'm sorry.
The accommodations are rustic. Devin tells him nothing much has happened so far. Mark's just glad to be here. He comments on the cozy room.
Dude, did you see the one next door?
Yeah.
It's like psychotically expensive. It's like a frickin' lodge. I hate whoever's in there.
This sets Rickon up for a hilarious comment. He rears back with a huge grin on his face.
It's just fat cats making fat kittens.
Devin has a contraction.
Fuck.
Mark, say a secret, quickly.
Huh? Mark looks confused. Devin says he doesn't have to. So what's the deal with the secret?
The fetus is drawn to clear air. Purging secrets can create a soul void that speeds the labor.
Oh, yeah, sure. This is widely proven medical fact, right?
Okay, and we want that.
Oh, we do.
Just when you thought Rickon had maxed out on the crazy, he comes up with something like this. Writing the Rickon character has to be a blast. Rickon refuses to let the moment pass. He blurts out his own secret.
Mark, I love you, and I feel hurt that you haven't called me to thank me for the book yet. There, good.
Mark, of course, has no idea what he means. Cobell nabbed the book just minutes after it was dropped off. Any Mark has been enjoying it immensely, but Outie Mark is stymied.
The book?
Devin says they left a copy on his doorstep 5 days ago.
full days.
So we know any Mark has been in possession of it for 4 days. Mark correctly says it must have been stolen. Rickon goes into a panic. It's a pre-release copy. Devin has another contraction, but it pales in comparison to the pain Rickon is feeling, knowing a copy of his unreleased book might be floating around in unauthorized hands. Devin needs space, a breather, a buffer between her and Rickon. She leaves the birthing cabin saying she's going to find some coffee. I thought coffee was a no-no during pregnancy. I discovered many studies say a little is okay. Pregnant women can safely consume no more than 200 milligrams of caffeine per day without risk of harm to the fetus. 200 milligrams translates to about a 12-ounce cup of coffee. Also, coffee might be a good thing immediately before delivery. Studies indicate caffeine can significantly improve the speed and force of contractions during labor. And remember, all of these things are coming to you from your podcast host. Please consult with a medical professional before consuming caffeine during pregnancy. After Devin leaves, Rickon enlists Mark to help him finish setting up the birthing cabin. He grabs what looks like a roasting pan full of weeds.
Mark, would you help me hang the kelp?
Mark knows better, but he can't help himself. He asks, why?
Do you really want me to explain it?
So Rickon knows how absurd he looks in Mark's eyes. Oh, it won't stop him from hanging the kelp, but he knows. I had to know if there was any kelp hanging info out there when it comes to pregnancy. As far as I can tell, no, this seems to be a writer's invention. I tried a bunch of different search strings in Google. The only thing I found that even came close was information about laminaria, but you don't hang laminaria. You can go do your own research about laminaria. There is, of course, a Severance subreddit discussing the hanging of the kelp, but no one's ever heard of it outside of this scene. Devin is trudging through the snow, her teeth chattering. She sees the woman who is in the massive lodge-like cabin next door. A man steps out onto the porch, leaving. Devin tries to get his attention, but he doesn't hear her. This woman has coffee. You can see it through the window. Devin can't help herself. She steps onto the porch and waves.
Hi, I'm so sorry. I'm another pregnant lady. I'm from over there. I just came out on a coffee run, and I got distracted by your beautiful coffee, and I was wondering if there's any chance you could hook me up.
I don't question this scene a bit. I fully understand coffee addiction. It will drive you to extremes. The woman with the coffee seems hesitant, but ultimately agrees. Devin enters the monster birthing cabin. She goes right for the pot on the coffee table.
I'm Devin.
Gabby.
Thank you for the narcotics. My husband is driving me fucking crazy. My brother's depressing me.
The woman asks if this is Devin's first.
Yeah. Yours?
The woman says she's here for her third.
I'm naming him William.
The woman, as we will discover, is Gabrielle Gabby Arteta. She is the wife of powerful senator and Lumen crony Angelo Arteta. Angelo is so in favor of the severance procedure, he's had his wife implanted with a chip. She's doing childbirth the anyway, which raises the question, what happened to spatial separation? The Audi statement read at the time of the procedure indicates memories are split based on where you are. Gabby's situation tells us for the first time in the series, it's possible to be in a severed state, just walking around out in the world. Before we leave the giant birthing lodge, let's meet the woman playing Gabby. This is Nora Dale from West Covina, California. Nora has a unique cultural background. She's a third-generation Mexican-American with Basque, Spanish, English, and Native American Choctaw thrown into the mix. Nora moved to Venice Beach in the early 2000s so she could pursue a modeling and commercial career. In 2006, after the death of her grandfather, Nora stepped away from performance to spend more time with her family. She only recently returned to Hollywood. Severance is her second of 3 IMDb profile credits, but she does have 3 more upcoming. We cut back to the hanging of the kelp. Rickon is trying to spin the theft of his book in a positive light.
If the thief reads the book, it will have been worth it. In fact, I bet you he turns himself in afterward.
If any Mark or any Dylan were the thief, he might be right. In their eyes, the great Dr. Hale can do no wrong. Otherwise, Rickon's opinion of his book may not be shared by others. Rickon proves he has a knack for opening old wounds. He says he knows Mark's last time in a medical facility was for Gemma.
Oh, is that what this is? Medical facility?
The term Mark used, shitty ski lodge, comes to mind. Rickon mentions how much they wanted to give the baby Gemma as a middle name in tribute. This sounds like a past discussion already decided. Mark tells him his baby should have her own name.
Without some big, feely baggage.
Having a niece with Gemma's middle name may also be too close and present a reminder for Mark. Devon leaves the massive lodge cabin carrying a steaming cup of coffee. Back at the cozy nook, Rickon has fallen asleep. Devon and Mark are talking on the bed as Devon shares her newly acquired coffee. She mentions making friends with the richest lady in baby camp.
She was quiet, but she was nice.
She also mentions just how cute she was. She wants to send Mark up there.
I'd imagine she's spoken for.
This line of discussion, of course, leads back to Alexa. Devon thinks Alexa would give Mark a second chance. He's not so sure. He was there for the date, and he knows just how bad it was. Devon says he should ask her. Then she goes into another contraction. Mark offers to go find Alexa. Devon just needs a hand to squeeze. Rickon is not awake to demand a secret from anybody, so Mark offers.
You need me to tell a secret?
Yeah, go ahead. Give me your dark shit.
It's like he needs to get something off his chest. Devon says, sure, lay it on her. Mark hesitates.
I kind of think Lumen might be up to something.
Devon figures he means like paychecks. Mark is circumspect, like this is much bigger. He says he's been hearing things around. Mark is so freaked saying these things out loud, he pauses to look over his shoulder. His nervousness makes Devon curious.
You remember the businessman?
Sure, the guy standing out in the yard behind Devon's house, right? Before Devon can answer, she has a powerful contraction. The coffee might be kicking in.
Oh! Holy fucking pit of hell!
Her cry awakens Rickon. The moment of sibling gossip is over before Mark can tell her what's been happening. This really is it. Alexa is summoned. There's an audio montage of Devon screaming, Alexa offering support, Rickon freaking out. It's all happening over a piano piece. We start on a long shot of Mark's back. He's sitting on a dock looking out over what must be Lake Mohonk. Cut to Mark's face, contemplative, troubled. We hear a familiar sound before there's a cut to Mark's basement. Petey's phone with the amazing battery is still buzzing in the sleeping bag box. The beating of the telltale heart cannot be silenced. The sounds of birth continue as Mark revisits a mental image, Petey's bloody face as he collapses in the gas station parking lot. Back on the dock, Mark grabs his forehead. The pain of letting Petey down is really getting to him. As we transition away from Mark on the dock, we hear Milchick's voice.
She was in Audi form at the time she woke up. So this will be any Helly's first conscious experience since the hanging.
Milchick is meeting with Mark, preparing him for the return of Helly. Milchick wants Mark to work on having kind eyes. It will be important for Mark to look at her with kind eyes, especially when she's first off the elevator.
Do you know how to make your eyes kind?
Mark furrows his brow, pauses, then gives it a try. Kind eyes are not normally something you do on command. Mark opens his eyes wide and tries on a few different expressions. The cut to Milchick reacting to Mark's attempts is pretty great. Mark keeps cycling through sad, concerned, maybe smelled something bad. Milchick must decide it'll do. There's a cut to Mark and Milchick standing in the elevator reception area. We can hear the whir of the elevator. Mark looks stiff and nervous. Milchick is checking his phone. As the elevator arrives, Milchick gives Mark a nod and strides quickly away. Mark turns to face the elevator door. He is a reception party of one. When the door first opens, we're looking at Mark's reaction. We can hear Helly. She's gasping for breath. Mark is looking down, concerned. He crouches. The reverse angle shows us Helly now in a blue silk blouse and a green skirt. She's sitting on the floor in the corner of the elevator. In her perception, it was just seconds ago when she kicked the trash can away. She's gulping down air but can't speak. The rush of adrenaline and the physical reaction to the experience has her almost paralyzed.
You're okay. It's all right.
Helly's breathing slows. We're getting close-ups of both Mark and Helly's faces, cutting back and forth between them. When Helly takes a breath that seems a little less panicked, we reverse to Mark. This is when he decides to try some kind eyes. The result is more demented serial killer than comforting friend. When they cut back to Helly, you can see she's not sure what Mark is trying to do with all the faces. She does seem to be slightly amused by it. I felt like she was just about to say, "What's with the weird face?" but they cut away to the kitchenette. It's a few minutes later. Mark is sitting across from Helly at the kitchenette table, and in case you were wondering, it's 9:26.
So they locked away the extension cords and other dangerous items, so, you should be safe.
Helly stares silently.
And if you want to focus on looking for happy numbers for a while, that's fine.
Helly bursts out laughing at this. He so doesn't get it. Mark leans in conspiratorially.
Do you want to talk about it?
Helly leaves the kitchenette without a word. In the MDR work area, we see Irv through an opening in the cubicle walls. His head is isolated. Irv, you remember, thought a trip to perpetuity would cement Helly's love for the whole Lumen-Innie experience. It was a resounding disaster, but he's not giving up.
We should hide inspirational handbook quotes around the office for her to stumble upon.
Dylan is as sold on the power of the perks as Irv is on the draw of Kier. He thinks she needs to get in there, start refining, and earn those rewards.
I'd end my life if I didn't have any finger traps yet.
Mark needs spiritual sustenance as the two stooges keep talking. He digs into the files for his copy of The You Are. As Mark is sitting at his desk, a woman walks up to his workstation. It's not Helly. This person is dressed differently. Mark is a bit surprised to realize it's Ms. Casey, the wellness director, standing next to him. He tucks the book under his coat as he turns.
I'm here to observe Helly R.
Cobell ordered this without alerting Mark.
I'm to watch her for signs of sadness and verbally encourage her to forego further suicide attempts.
Okay, sounds like a fun day. Irv lowers his cubicle wall to give Ms. Casey a stern look. Ms. Casey is authorized to offer one more wellness service.
Upon request, I can also perform a hug.
In the midst of this very tense and serious drama, there are some pretty funny segments. Ben Stiller said he really thought the overall vibe of the show would be more comedic. Even with the much heavier feel, you still get some fun bits like this one. Dylan pops up from behind his cubicle.
I've been exhibiting signs of sadness. Could I get one of those?
No.
She could not have answered any faster. Shot down, Dylan slowly disappears behind his cubicle wall. Miss Casey got there at 9:35. It's about 90 minutes later when we see a long shot of the MDR space. Miss Casey is sitting in a chair behind Helly. Helly is hunched over with her head almost on her workstation. Mark's chair is empty. I'm guessing he's in the reading room. There's a great up-angle look through Helly's arms from under her desk. In true bored high school student fashion, Helly plucks an eyelash. She flicks it away. Ms. Casey scratches down quite a few notes about this event.
Did you get all that?
Ms. Casey looks up, confused.
Are you upset?
Helly says no, she's peachy. Ms. Casey reminds her.
If you're upset, you can request a
hug. I know. I'm good.
It's late morning, the coffee's worn off, and it's still about 45 minutes before lunch. Irv is drifting again. He's blinking, trying to stay awake. We reverse angle looking at his monitor. The numbers blur. There's a close-up of Irv's hand when a glob of black paint lands on the back of his hand. The last time Irv dreamt about the paint, when it touched him, he jumped. This time he seems okay with paint on his skin, but what's the source of the paint? Irv slowly looks up. A huge flow of paint is closing in on top of the light panels. Irv watches as the first drips start to seep through the panels. Huge globs begin to pelt the walls of the cubicle. Irv looks up. The paint on the light panels has broken through and is running down the angled areas of the ceiling. I couldn't find any information about this effect, but the paint running down the angled panels looks like it's practical. I think they're really flowing paint through those panels. Fluids are still some of the trickiest surfaces and physics for computer-generated effects to get right. The plops hitting the cubicle look like computer generation because the physics is slightly off, but the flow over the panels looks really good. This paint is also sounding really good. Those splotches are sharp and full. This is some gooey, viscous paint. The paint sounds, the sound of the typing keyboards, the sound of Irv raising and lowering his cubicle wall, even the padded treads of a walking worker are all added into the soundtrack later as Foley sounds. These sounds, so realistic and seemingly environmental, are actually the product of sound designer Jacob Ribikoff and his team of Foley artists and editors. We've mentioned Ribikoff in the past, but we will definitely be discussing more of his creepy sound choices in later episodes. Irv is watching the mayhem as the paint continues to land all over the workstations. He rolls back in his chair. We can see Mark in the next cubicle sitting parallel with Irv. Now, that's not how they sit. Each of the four refiners faces a different direction based on the design of the diamond desk. Also, Mark wasn't in his chair when we saw the long establishing shot. We see Mark roll back in his chair next to Irv. We can only see the right side of his head when he rolls back. In Irv's dream, Mark turns to fully face him. Black paint is running from Mark's left eye. He says, "Irv." Irv. And Irv jumps up from his chair. Irv looks again, and the paint is gone. When Irv snaps out of it, Mark is now somehow back at his workstation for real.
We lose you again there, buddy?
That snooze must have been longer than we thought. Irv looks distraught and confused. He looks from Mark to the ceiling where the paint was just flowing. He looks freaked.
Irv?
I have to go to O&D. Something's come up. And I'd like to seek Burt's counsel.
Mark glances over at Ms. Casey. She's isolated in the shot by the cubicle walls. It's a cool-looking shot choice. He's not sure how much Ms. Casey might rat them out if things are happening that shouldn't be, like refiners making treks to O&D. Mark tells Irv he can go, but make a copy of the map to O&D in case they need to come find him. As Irv is copying the map left by Burt, a couple of full-color prints roll out of the copier. These prints are in the dark Gothic style we've seen in other Lumen art. It's reminiscent of Spanish Romantic painter Francisco Goya in his Black period. But this subject is modern and chaotic. Irv slowly picks one out of the print tray. He cringes at what he's seeing in close-up. After watching Irv's disgust, we get a reverse angle of the image. A man who appears to be in a modern-looking work shirt and tie is wielding a bloody knife. There are flames and people running behind him. We tilt down to what's happening on the floor in front of the man. Yuck! A person wearing a blue keycard, the color of MDR, has had his guts ripped open. A man with a green keycard who looks almost Cro-Magnon is squatting beside him. The caveman-looking guy has pulled the intestines out of the blue keycard guy, and he is very graphically eating them. Anywhere you look in this scene, those with blue keycards are being abused or killed, while the green keycard folks are, without question, the aggressors. Irv picks up both printouts and starts to turn away from the copier. He's most likely headed to report these offending items. As soon as he turns, Milchick is right there.
I'm sorry, Irving. We must have sent this print job here by mistake. You weren't supposed to see this.
Yeah, like anybody's making that big a mistake around Lumen. Irv wants to know what he's looking at. Milchick claims it's nothing, a joke from Miss Cobell. Irv's no dummy. He knows what he's looking at.
It's the O&D coup, isn't it?
Irv admitting Dylan is right about anything has to be hard. Irv asks Milchick if it actually happened.
Of course not. Nothing like that could happen here.
Cut to the storeroom. Dylan and Irv are whispering conspiratorially. Irv held on to at least one of the offending prints. Weird that Milchick let him keep it. Dylan's convinced.
It's proof. It is ironclad proof.
Irv tells him Milchick said it didn't happen, but it's hard to counter the picture right in front of them, even if it is a painting. Irv wants to know why one department would physically attack another.
Lumen wouldn't just then give them all the other department's resources.
Dylan wonders if O&D knows that.
Are we even sure about it?
I love the comedy duo dynamic between Irv and Dylan. Even when the subject is this dark, their back and forth is always a blast to watch.
With 7 people, there is a lot that they could do to us.
Irv starts to suggest asking Burt. Dylan points out how much Burt has seemingly lied to them.
How do we know what else he isn't being kosher about?
Irv pauses for a long time, taking in the horror of the gory coup. Cut to the back of Milchick's head as he's walking down a hallway. As we follow him, I wanted to make mention of an interesting detail about Milchick's wardrobe. Aspiring actors, take note. This is some cool stuff. In a Vulture article, Tremel Tillman said he intentionally wears Milchick's pants higher than he would normally wear pants in real life. It doesn't just change the look of the pants. He said it changes everything. Tremel said it informs how he moves. He said he tends to move differently with his pants pulled up instead of down on his hip. He said this change even affects his voice. It causes him to speak more forcefully from his diaphragm. Milchick turns into Cobell's outer office to find her standing there.
You ran a 266 on Irving B?
It sounds like the severed floor has a deep playbook. A 266? Milchick says, yeah, he thought it might cut down on Irv's visits to Burt G.
I'm sorry, should I have consulted you?
Cobell looks a bit hurt, but tells him good initiative.
I saw Miss Casey down there. You're having her watch Helly R.
The camera pans to give us a look at the security monitor Cobell was watching. Ben Stiller said revealing just how much the severed workers were being watched was always a concern during production. The revelation there are cameras pretty much everywhere has been parceled out slowly throughout the series. By now, security footage doesn't surprise us all that much. Harmony is looking at the long shot of the MDR cubicle cluster. Mark still isn't at his workstation. Milchick wants to know why Cobell would have Miss Casey watch Helly. Cobell answers with what must be a Keir quote.
The light of discovery shines truer upon a virgin meadow than a beaten path.
She says she's trying something new with Ms. Casey and she wants Milchick to keep quiet about it.
Right.
In the MDR bathroom, Helly is looking at herself in the mirror. She's rubbing her hands over the bruises on her neck hard. She studies her reflection in the mirror. She looks frustrated and defeated. Helly turns away from the mirror and looks contemplative. When Helly emerges, she's immediately met by Ms. Casey.
Please describe for me your time in the restroom.
Mark knows this is about the last thing Helly needs right now. He offers a distraction by intentionally spilling some dark Rwandan coffee on Ms. Casey's Lumen notebook.
I'm so sorry, Miss Casey. I turned and...
Dylan never ceases to amaze me with his somewhat skewed knowledge of the outie world.
Bet you're drunk. What'd your mouth taste like when you got in today?
Which raises an interesting question. Imagine coming to as your innie when your outie is drunk, high, or sick. Being an innie is confusing enough without layering a hangover on top of it. Ms. Casey's response to Mark's accident is pragmatic. She needs a new notebook, but her assignment is to watch Helly. She can't both stay here with Helly and go get a new notebook.
Helly R, you have to come with me to distribution supply.
Mark is trying his best to prevent Helly from being forced to hang with Ms. Casey.
That's okay. I can watch Helly R while you're gone. It's only a few minutes, right?
Ms. Casey is a precise person. A few minutes is not an acceptable measurement.
Distribution supply is 8 minutes. Round trip.
We're going to have to take her word for it because Petey did not mark DNS on his map. Helly looks pleadingly at Mark over Ms. Casey's shoulder. Ms. Casey seems to sense the vibe and starts to exit the MDR area without Helly.
You know, I go to distribution supply all the time, so I could, if you...
Ms. Casey gives him a wordless look and passes on by. Dylan is shot down again.
Well, that's one less horrible thing. For 8 minutes, anyway.
Helly sits at her workstation. Mark suddenly seems to remember something, or At least he's pretending to remember something. It's the sign of a good actor if they can portray a bad actor. Adam Scott's got the bad acting thing down.
Helly, I just realized I haven't shown you where we keep the extra pen caps.
Huh? This is just weird. Helly is looking at him like he's off his rocker.
I'm good, thanks.
She's not getting it. Mark wants to get her out of here.
Nah, you're right. Shouldn't go anywhere without Miss Casey.
Okay, so now Helly's getting it. She glances over at the MDR entrance, then starts to stand.
Careful out there, boss. Weird energy about.
Ooh, and he's right. Very weird. We cut to a great shot of Miss Casey returning from DNS with an armload of notebooks. When we first see her, she is visible through a narrow vertical opening at a turn in the hall. She is literally being marginalized and trapped in this very narrow vertical space. As Miss Casey continues towards us, let's talk hallways. The hallways are a phenomenal part of the entire Severance soundstage. They were created by production designer Jeremy Hindle on 3 sound stages at York Studios in the Bronx. The hallways may seem sterile and cold at first glance, but they do have a life and personality all their own. The hallways aren't a standard width. They even subtly change in width as you progress. Hindle set the hallways up originally so they really did connect various parts of the set, like the conference room and the elevator reception area, to other places on the floor. As for the color, you might joke about white being white, but Hindle actually did screen test with 26 different shades of white, so he could get the wall color just perfect. The floors of the hallways are hollow, so footfalls from the performers are loud and booming naturally. Ben Stiller said he loves the hallways, but he hates the sound issues. Getting natural sound from performer voices without it being drowned out by booming footsteps was always a challenge. They even put felt on the bottoms of the actors' shoes to try to mute the walking sound. The sharp, tight footfalls we hear in the final were created by Ribicoff and the Foley team. They said they were both shocked and delighted when director Stiller told them he not only loved the walking sounds, he wanted them turned up in the mix. Ms. Casey passes the conference room. She sees Burt G. wandering among the chairs, seemingly deep in conversation with himself. It sounds like he's telling or practicing telling a joke. We can barely hear the rasp of, so he says to the bartender.
He says to the bartender, hey, go fight.
Ms. Casey stops walking. She stands for a moment in the hall, then turns, deciding whether she wants to engage this man who's mumbling to himself. He is a patient of hers, after all. She decides her Helly assignment is more important, turns back, and continues on to MDR. Cut to Mark and Helly, also walking down an enormous expanse of white hallway. Helly is seeing through Mark's very flimsy story.
So where are all these pen caps at?
The only thing possibly worse than Ms. Casey sitting behind you all day is Mark being concerned.
How are you doing, Helly?
Did you make up the pen caps to ask me that?
I just wanted to talk.
Helly says she's really bad. The bruises around her neck from the recent suicide attempt, along with the dejected demeanor, should have been a tip.
Come here.
They veer down an unlit side hallway and go into a large, unused work area. The desks and chairs are covered in plastic sheeting. Mark produces his own version of Petey's map. He shows it to Helly, telling her he's been trying to recreate it since she left. He says maybe they can work on it together. Mark is desperately trying to make a connection with Helly. Connecting to anyone in this place is the last thing Helly wants, especially in her current state of mind.
I'm not your new Petey.
Helly knows how to slice deep. She hands back the map and walks out. You can almost see your breath thanks to Helly's chilly response. We have no idea where she's going, and neither does she. There's a cut back to the hallways. This section of the severed floor must be rarely used because the lights are set to come on by motion only. The hallway stretches out in darkness ahead. As Helly gets to each lighting grid segment, it turns on. The one she just passed through turns off. Mark is following behind, and he's always stuck in the shadows.
Helly.
Helly takes a random turn in the hallway.
Helly are?
We've cut back to the MDR area. Miss Casey has just returned from distribution and supply with a dozen fresh notebooks. She's looking for her charge.
Mark took her to look at pen caps.
Miss Casey is distressed about this.
Where?
Dylan says they're fine.
Just at the end of the storage wing.
Miss Casey starts to head out in search of Helly. She pauses as she passes by Irv.
Burt G is in the conference room.
The perceptiveness of the wellness director may be sharper than we think. Irv makes haste to the conference room.
Burt. Irving.
Irv wants to know what he's doing there. Burt says he got turned around, but he was looking for Irv.
I hadn't heard from you.
As Irv and Burt are awkwardly talking, Dylan comes up behind Irv fast. Irv didn't go all the way into the conference room, so Dylan is able to pull the door closed and move Irv out into the hall at the same time. It's a violent move, and it happens in seconds. Irv yells.
Dylan, oh my God! What are you doing? He was coming at you!
In a move foreshadowing the final episode, Dylan ties the handles of the door together with his woven cloth belt. Dylan is frightened by the copier painting and in a rage about Burt's lies.
You saw that painting? You want to get disemboweled today? Hey, where's your friends? Plural. As in the 6 fucking people you've been hiding from us.
Irv told Dylan about what he saw at O&D. This is the first time Burt knows what Irv knows. Irv can't handle this. He shouts at Dylan to let Burt out.
I know what you're up to. What is wrong with you? Open the door.
Dylan is laying into Burt as Irv goes to the hallway security camera. We get an interesting shot here of a bank of security monitors, most likely in the security office. Irving is in the screen in the lower right corner. We don't see who's monitoring these screens, and as we'll discover, it's possible no one is watching these screens. There's an interesting cut to a darkened hallway and a square of light in the middle of the screen. Helly is still walking through the motion sensor area of the severed floor.
Helly.
This is way out of Mark's usual area of travel. Helly is purposefully striding along.
Where the fuck are we?
Helly stops. She and Mark are face to face in the hall.
I told her I wanted out and she told me I wasn't a person.
Yeah, that was pretty cutting. Not surprising considering what we know about any Helly, but still cutting. Helly starts back the way she came. Mark's chasing her, trying to minimize those awful outy words.
Yeah, and that's horrible, but don't focus on her. What do you want?
Mark asks her what she wants in here.
What I want is for her to wake up while the life drains out of her and to know it was me who did it.
Okay, so maybe Helly isn't getting where Mark was wanting to go with this conversation. As Mark tries to rephrase, they are interrupted by an adorable sound. Both Mark and Helly turn towards the sound, looking a bit freaked out. Cut back to the conference room where Dylan is still holding Burt prisoner.
If I could just explain.
Save it, Marauder.
I checked the whole storage wing. No sign of him or Helly.
Shit, O&D's probably killed them already.
Marauder? This seems like it might be just the tiniest bit of an overreaction to Burt's visit. Burt tries an appeal to Irving. He says he just came here to see Irv.
And the rest of your department?
They're back in O&D, Irving. I know. I said it was just Felicia.
If you came here to see me, then why are you in the conference room? Why not come right to the office?
Burt said he didn't want to scare Irv or embarrass him like with the hand thing.
You didn't scare me.
Or embarrass you.
It was a joke we heard.
It's working out a joke.
Joke?
The same when I got in.
Prove it. Tell it.
I hadn't worked it out yet.
There's an awkward chuckle between Irv and Burt. Dylan has lost some of his righteous fire. Irv leans close to the glass and whispers to Burt.
Why did you lie about the number of people in your department?
Burt surprisingly says it's because his guys don't trust MDR.
You, the king of fucks, don't trust us?
I do, but people just talk about MDR. Stupid old stories, jokes even.
Normally, feuds and grudges do go both ways. If you hate them, they're going to hate you right back. There's also usually a lot of misinformation being thrown around, like this little gem.
It's literally silly. Like they say, you all have pouches.
Pouches? Like to carry young?
Yes, according to some. You each have a larval offspring that will jump out and attack if we get too close.
Disemboweling and eating entrails sounds kind of tame next to larval offspring in a pouch, but wait, there's more.
In this theory, the larva eventually eats and replaces you.
And whoa, Burt is smooth. He turns this into a compliment about Irv.
Which Irving would solve the mystery of your youthful energy.
Burt G is a playa. They both smile. Irv looks down embarrassed, but beaming. Dylan's reaction is priceless. If you've ever seen YouTube videos where people do magic tricks in front of animals, Zach Cherry has the look of a dog who just saw his master disappear. Dylan heads down the hallway calling Irv to come with him.
Are you sweet on this guy?
Irv asks if Dylan disapproves. He says he does, but only because this guy is O&D.
You are duplicitous snakes to a one. It's not safe.
As Irv considers Dylan's words, we cut back to that adorable noise. Mark and Helly are walking side by side, headed towards the sound. Their first hint of what they are about to encounter is a shadow. The shadow of a baby goat. It comes into the hallway, looks at them, and retreats to a lighted room. Mark slowly opens the door to reveal the goat wrangler. Refiners, we are in the room of the baby goats. Like the polar bear on Lost, the baby goats have become a giant question mark and one of the primary topics of discussion regarding Severance. What's up with the baby goats? Dan Erickson says he knows. I hope he knows. I am counting on him knowing. Ben Stiller says he's confident Dan knows. Ben said Dan is a very creative guy who's thought through the details about this world. During production, Ben said he and the cast would regularly pelt Dan with questions about what's happening and what's going to happen. Ben said Dan always had creative and interesting answers. Dan says there is a reason for the goats, and it will be revealed. Until then, let's keep trying to crash the internet with those baby goat theories. In researching one of the more popular baby goat theories, I was directed by a fan to seek out a script called Mr. This is the original pilot script written by Dan Erickson and posted to script rating sites for review. I'll put a link to it in the show notes. It's darker, weirder, and very different than what eventually became Good News About Hell. In Mr., Mark is the newly severed employee. Helly is already a scrappy and severed floor smart coworker. Irv is a simpleton, but the fastest refiner on the floor. The title of the spec refers to the name of a rat Cobell keeps in a cage. The rat, Mr., has been severed. When Mr. is an outie, he's fine. When Cobell switches the chip, the rat's innie becomes insanely frightened. We're told it's because every time Cobell switches Mr. to its innie, she burns it with a soldering iron. Some Discord and Reddit commenters believe the goats are stand-ins for the rat. Even Screen Rant posted an article saying the original pilot script reveals the real reason for the baby goats. These folks believe the goats are severed, then somehow will be tortured as a test of the chip. I think this theory is a stretch, and really, I'm kind of hoping there's more to it than that. And we'll see. Again, Dan Erickson swears he's got a story to go with the goats. Based on what he's given us this first season, I'm going to believe him. So let's check out the goats. There are about a dozen of them. It's hard to count moving baby goats. A man in a suit and a leather apron is sitting on a small white barn like it's a bench. Next to the barn is a small white grain silo. A tiny white fence runs through the middle of the room. On one side of the fence is straw and watering troughs. On the other side of the fence is white floor. The man is holding a goat on his lap, feeding it with a baby bottle. A couple of other goats are trying to climb up on him. The rest are wandering around the room, making that adorable noise. Numerous reviewers and commenters have mentioned the human-like quality of the baby goat sounds. Many think human voices or the cries of a human baby have been added into the mix. In his A Sound Effect interview, Jacob Ribicoff revealed the secret of the goat sound. It's 100% real. The goat noises are all production sound recorded live as the scene was being shot. Ribicoff said it was perfect right off the camera. There was no manipulation, addition, or mix-in necessary. Ribicoff wants to nominate the goats for some kind of recognition as an ensemble. A sound the Foley team did add in was the sound of baby goat feet. The tiny clop clop was accomplished using Dixie cups. If you have a high-def TV with good color reproduction, you might make out an interesting part of the goat room. There's an entire farm scene along the back wall in white, on white. On my computer monitor, I can catch some of the clouds to the left, but that's about it. It looks like wall stickers, like what you'd get for a nursery, have been applied white on white to the back wall. If you check the Severance wiki, the various segments of the farm scene have been highlighted so you can make them out. The goat wrangler has noticed Mark and Helly at the door.
They're not ready.
He looks up, distressed.
You can't take them yet. They're not ready.
He says it isn't time. The goat noises are a bit unnerving up close like this. The goat in his lap lets go with a less than adorable noise. The goat wrangler tells Mark and Helly to get the hell out of here.
Go!
They back away, retreating into the darkened hallway. I've been referring to this man as the goat wrangler because that's how he's listed in the credits on IMDb. This is American actor Brian Rock. Brian was born and raised in the suburbs of Philadelphia. He's been acting since 2018 and has notched 8 IMDb credits, including this appearance on Severance. This is the Goat Wrangler's only appearance this season, and no word yet if he'll be back for season 2. We cut back to Dylan, who is stalking along behind Burt and Irv as they discuss the 266. Irv's hands are tied behind his back, once again using Dylan's belt.
The grim Barbarity, optics and design.
That's what it said.
There's definitely no painting by that name. What kind of barbarities were we enacting?
It doesn't matter. I don't think it was real.
He'd rather not get into disemboweling in MDR charcuterie.
I mean, I'll have to confer with my larva, of course.
Hold on a minute. Did Irv just tell a joke? What is happening here? The two men have a good laugh as they continue down the hall. Dylan follows, shaking his head and looking perturbed. Irv is almost talking under his breath as they approach the entrance to O&D.
You know that relationships beyond the platonic are frowned upon anyway.
Burt asks if that's what they are? Dylan interrupts before Irv answers. Irv formally releases Burt G. from MDR's supervision by taking the belt off his wrists. Irv, of course, can't do something so ceremonial without a quote.
As Kia said, be ever merry.
They're standing in the hall looking into the O&D receiving area, the one with the visible flat files. Initially, Burt invites Irv to join him.
There is something in the storeroom I'd like to show you.
And he seems to remember Dylan and adds him into the invite.
And Dylan, of course.
We cut to a close-up of a very dark, steamy painting. And I don't mean romantically steamy. This picture shows literal steam rising up from an industrial vat. The surrounding factory is shrouded in fog.
Courtship of Kier and Imogen.
Irv and Burt are leaning against one of the workstations as they admire the enormous canvas hung on the far wall. Burt says Kier met his wife Imogen while working as a stew man at an ether factory. The painting shows a young man stirring a huge steaming vat of something, possibly ether. A young woman, Imogen, is standing by the vat talking to the handsome young Kier Egan. She was a swab girl. Ether was discovered in the 1500s. It was first used as an inhaled anesthetic in 1846. Ether is synthesized through a process called bimolecular dehydration. Since ether is highly flammable and it oxidizes when exposed to the air, cooking it in an open vat seems not only dangerous but impossible. Not only would the stew man pass out from the fumes, the whole kettle would probably explode. I couldn't confirm the terms stew man or ether factory as actual things. It does make a great story and a dramatic picture, but unless this is an alternate universe, these ether factory stories seem to have been created for the innies to enjoy.
My handbook just says they were bonded by the spirit of industry.
Irv and Burt continue to discuss the canvas as Dylan goes wandering among the shelves of O&D. Irv says Imogen and Kier met as colleagues.
Took heart to each other as colleagues.
Dylan has pulled open a flat file to reveal the same picture from the 266, or at least it's close. Dylan grabs it and confronts Burt.
You lying fuck!
Dylan says Burt knew about this painting. Irv glances at it and realizes
it's not the same.
In this canvas, the badges of the raiders are blue, not green. The killers, the marauders, the evildoers in this picture are macrodats.
It's not O&D, Dylan. It's us.
Burt says this canvas is called...
It's called the Macro Data Refinement Calamity.
It's never been displayed anywhere in the halls. Dylan came to MDR after Mark, yet he says MDR has never done anything like that. I'm not sure how he'd know, but he seems certain.
Why the hell would there be two versions of the same painting?
All three are standing by the work table mulling over this question as we dissolve to an almost black screen. Mark and Helly are still navigating the areas of the floor with the motion sensor lights. We see a tiny square of light in the center of the frame. As they walk, they're discussing the goat room discovery.
I mean, what if the goats are the numbers?
She thinks the work of MDR might be deciding which goats live and...
Oh, God.
I doubt it's that.
Really, why would it be that? It seems like an elaborate way to sort goats without any real purpose. Mark uses his alone time with Helly to confess something.
I know you don't want to be here, but I'm glad you are.
He says he's sorry, but this is the best he can do right now. Helly understands how desperately Mark is reaching out, so she throws him a bone.
If you give me the map, I'll clean it up.
Helly tells Mark his drawing is shit, just as we hear footsteps approaching. Ms. Casey appears, coming from a side hallway. She's still carrying the dozen or so notebooks she retrieved from distribution and supply. Mark understands she's been out searching for them.
Oh, hi, Miss Casey. We were just heading back from our mental health walk.
Ms. Casey is concerned. She wants to know they're both unhurt. Helly assures her they're fine.
I'm glad. I was scared.
Ms. Casey turns and begins to lead Mark and Helly out of the labyrinth of motion-lighted hallways. As they begin walking towards the camera, the quality of the video looks off. There's a pull out to reveal we're watching a surveillance monitor. We pull out even more to reveal Cobell watching the trio make their way down the corridor. The notation in the upper left corner of the monitor identifies this as Cam S-602. There's a knock at Cobell's door. She clicks out of the camera view and goes to the Lumen logo screensaver. It's like she was caught playing solitaire. Grainer sticks his head through her office door.
You aware what MDR is up to right now?
Cobell is cutting and in control.
I thought that's what you were paid for.
Grainer confirms she's not stopping it. Cobell has this covered.
The surest way to tame a prisoner is to let him believe he's free.
Grainer might not be as big a fan of KE as others on the severed floor.
There's a cure quote for everything.
He wants to know how many more departments Cobell plans to allow them to find. The room of the baby goats was actually a department. Cobell says she'll have a word with Mark. Grainer doesn't think upstairs would be too happy about this.
Yes, Daddy.
Grainer fixes her with a cold stare. Cobell is not easily shaken.
You can talk to me when you figure out who hacked Kilmer's chip.
This ends the conversation. Grainer pulls Cobell's office door shut forcefully. We go from one door closing to another opening. Burt is leading the macrodats into the hidden back room of O&D. We cut to a low, wide shot looking across the room at the entering group. In the foreground are 8 workers. That makes 9 counting Burt. Each is up to something, whether it's reading a manual or running a machine. Burt leads with Irv and Dylan flanking him. He calls for attention among the O&D workers.
I want to introduce you all to Irving and Dylan. They're from MDR. They're friends.
The other members of the O&D team freeze. They aren't sure how to process this information from the chief. An eerie and haunting version of the main theme begins, and the credits roll. Keeping the departments separated is a relatively new development. As we've heard, it was really not part of Kier's original design. Burt and Irv are upsetting the status quo by allowing MDR and O&D to intermingle. Where will this lead? What problems might it cause? Oh, we're certainly going to find out, refiners, but for now, this file is at 100%. Please shut down your workstation. The next time we gather, refiners, the Alliance will be in full force and the gang will be playing hide and seek with Cobell. Your innie would be devastated if you missed it. Please leave by the elevator and make sure to stagger your exits.
You've been listening to Severed, the Ultimate Severance podcast. Severed is written, produced, and hosted by Alan Stair.
Severed is not endorsed by Red Hour Productions, Endeavor Content, or Apple TV+. This podcast is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only.
Severance, the Severance logo, and all video and audio of Severance and Severance characters are registered trademarks of Red Hour, Endeavor Content, Apple TV+, or their respective copyright holders.
Please make sure to leave a 5-star rating and review for Severed at Apple Podcasts.